Think for a moment and imagine waking up every single day feeling an invisible weight pressing down on your chest. It is a subtle, persistent pressure that you cannot quite name. You scroll through your phone, you interact with colleagues, you navigate the demands of your job, and you respond to an endless stream of digital messages. Yet through all of this activity, something feels profoundly off. Conversations feel colder than they used to. People seem more irritable, more defensive, more aggressive, or strangely empty. You might tell yourself it is just a bad day, or perhaps a streak of bad luck with the people you encounter. But now, imagine that this is not just your personal perception. Imagine that this is a pattern repeating across the entire world, a global shift in the human frequency. Think carefully about this question. What if modern society is not only failing to heal people, but is actively producing more toxic personalities than ever before? This is not about pointing fingers or blaming individuals for their flaws. This is about understanding forces that are much deeper than personal choice. We are talking about forces that shape human behavior, distort our emotions, and quietly influence how we treat ourselves and others. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will challenge your fundamental understanding of human nature, relationships, and even your own identity. The final insight revealed at the end of this journey will be the most important and powerful of all. It offers more than just a diagnosis. It offers a way out of the cycle. If you appreciate deep reflections on psychology, philosophy, and the hidden mechanics of human behavior, consider this an invitation to engage. What you will discover here may completely change the way you see modern life and the individuals standing right next to you. Redefining the toxic strategy. To understand why toxic behavior is becoming the new baseline, we must first redefine what toxicity really means. We often use the word as a label for people who are simply rude, manipulative, or narcissistic. But at a deeper psychological level, toxicity is a survival strategy. It is not a personality trait so much as it is a behavior shaped by fear, unresolved trauma, emotional deprivation, and relentless social conditioning. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, observed that when emotional needs are suppressed rather than understood, they do not simply vanish, they transform. They go underground and mutate into something unrecognizable. They emerge as anger, a desperate need for control, biting envy, or a profound emotional numbness. Modern society is exceptionally good at suppressing these emotions while simultaneously pretending to promote happiness. We are constantly bombarded with messages telling us to be productive, to stay positive, to be successful and independent. But rarely, if ever, are we taught how to actually feel. We are not taught how to process pain, how to sit with the crushing weight of discomfort, or how to navigate the complexities of grief. Carl Jung, another giant of psychology, warned that what is ignored within the psyche does not disappear. It sinks into the shadow, and the shadow does not remain passive. It expresses itself through projection, hostility, and destructive patterns toward others. When we refuse to look at our own darkness, we begin to see it in everyone else, and we react to them with a toxicity that is actually meant for ourselves. The transactional human. Think about how people interact today. Many conversations are no longer about listening, they are about winning. Many relationships are not about genuine connection, they are about mutual validation or utility. Social media, the digital architecture of our age, rewards outrage, comparison, and performance. It trains the mind to see other people not as human beings with depth, but as mirrors reflecting our own insecurities. Psychologist Erich Fromm argued that when a society prioritizes having over being, individuals begin to define their worth through external measures rather than inner integrity. We become what we possess, what we achieve, and how we are perceived. This creates incredibly fragile egos. Because these egos are built on the shifting sands of public opinion and external success, they react aggressively to any form of criticism or difference. When your entire identity is a performance, a single negative comment feels like an existential threat. Another crucial factor in this rising tide of toxicity is chronic stress. Modern life places the human nervous system under a level of constant pressure that we were never evolved to handle. Financial instability, information overload, a total lack of true rest, and the perpetual fear of falling behind keep people in a near-permanent state of fight or flight. Neuroscience shows that when the brain remains in survival mode for long periods, empathy begins to decrease. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher reasoning and compassion, takes a backseat to the amygdala, which handles fear and aggression. Stressed people are more likely to become toxic, not because they are inherently evil, but because their nervous systems are overwhelmed. They are literally incapable of accessing their humanity because they are too busy trying to survive the day. The absence of safety. Ask yourself this: how many people today feel truly safe? How many feel truly heard or understood? When psychological safety is absent, control begins to replace trust. Manipulation replaces honesty. Emotional withdrawal replaces vulnerability. Toxic behavior often masks a deep, shivering sense of powerlessness. Alfred Adler, one of the founders of individual psychology, believed that many destructive behaviors stem from profound feelings of inferiority. When people feel small on the inside, they try to dominate others on the outside to regain a sense of significance. The bully, the micromanager, and the emotional manipulator are often just frightened children in adult bodies, trying to prove they matter by making others feel like they don't. Modern society also encourages a devastating disconnection from meaning. Many people no longer feel like they are part of something larger than themselves. Work feels empty, relationships feel transactional, and life feels like a rushed, fragmented blur. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, observed that when people lack meaning, they fall into what he called the __5_. This emptiness is a vacuum that nature abhors, so it gets filled with something else. Usually that something is aggression, addiction, or emotional cruelty. If a society constantly rewards speed over depth, image over authenticity, and competition over cooperation, what kind of personalities do we expect it to produce? When vulnerability is seen as weakness and compassion is seen as an inefficiency, emotional armor becomes the norm. But armor, while it protects you from being hurt, also prevents you from being touched, the normalization of the false self. As we move deeper into this analysis, we have to recognize that modern society does not merely tolerate toxicity, it rewards it. In the corporate world, assertiveness without empathy is often celebrated as, quote, 6. In the world of dating, emotional detachment is mistaken for, quote, 7, or strength. Ruthlessness in business is reframed as, quote, 8. Over time, we learn a dangerous lesson. To survive and succeed, we must suppress our sensitivity and exaggerate our dominance. This starts early. From a young age, children are taught that their value depends entirely on performance. Grades, appearance, and popularity become the measures of their worth. When love and approval are conditional, the psyche adapts. Psychologist Donald Winnicott described this as the development of the __9_. This is a social mask designed to secure acceptance while hiding the vulnerable core of the person. As adults, many people no longer know who they are beneath this mask. They have spent so long performing for an audience that they have lost touch with their own soul. This inner disconnection manifests as a constant, low-level irritability or a cold defensive wall that others experience as toxicity. Trauma as a cultural constant. Trauma also plays a central role in the rising toxicity of our era, even when it is subtle. We often think of trauma as massive, catastrophic events, but it can also be chronic emotional neglect or the constant comparison inherent in a hyper-competitive culture. Neuroscience shows that unprocessed trauma shapes our very perception of reality. The brain begins to interpret neutral situations as threats. This is why some people overreact, lash out, or shut down emotionally in moments that seem minor to an observer. Their reactions are not actually about the present moment. They are echoes of unresolved past wounds. Unfortunately, modern culture rarely creates the space for healing. Instead, it promotes distraction. Endless entertainment, constant notifications, and the perpetual noise of the digital world prevent the introspection necessary for healing. Blaise Pascal once observed that much of human misery comes from our inability to sit quietly alone in a room. In a world that never slows down, we avoid silence because silence forces us to confront our inner pain. When that pain is avoided, it leaks out into our behavior. often hurting the people we claim to love. The erosion of the moral compass. There's also a profound moral confusion at play today. Traditional structures that once offered ethical grounding, community, shared value, and long-term commitments have weakened significantly. While our individual freedom has increased, our collective guidance has diminished. Without a clear inner compass, people often adopt the values that are rewarded by their immediate environment rather than values that cultivate character. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned that when old values collapse and nothing new takes their place, individuals risk falling into, quote, 10, a state where nothing feels truly meaningful. In such a state, empathy erodes. If nothing truly matters, then other people do not matter either. They become objects to be used, obstacles to be cleared, or enemies to be defeated. Toxic behavior is also remarkably contagious. Human beings are deeply influenced by social norms. When disrespect, sarcasm, and emotional avoidance become the standard mode of communication, they start to feel. Social psychologist Philip Zimbardo demonstrated how easily environments can alter behavior, even in healthy individuals. When you put people into systems that reward dominance and punish vulnerability, cruelty can emerge where compassion once lived. We see this in workplaces that prioritize the bottom line over the person. We see it in online spaces where anonymity removes accountability. We see it in relationships where people are treated as replaceable commodities rather than sacred bonds. Over time, this conditions us to protect ourselves first and connect second. But protection without connection leads to a profound isolation, and isolation is the primary breeding ground for resentment and toxic lashing out. Identity as a defense mechanism. Now imagine something even more unsettling. Imagine that toxicity is no longer just a behavior, but has become an identity. Imagine people no longer saying, quote 12, but instead thinking, quote 13. Modern society slowly convinces people to build their sense of self around their defenses. Quote 14. Quote 15. Quote 16. These beliefs are learned responses to emotional disappointment, but over time, the mind begins to equate emotional numbness with safety. The tragedy is that what once protected the psyche eventually becomes its prison. When someone fully identifies with their, quote, 17, they lose access to their inner life. Their empathy weakens, their capacity for self-reflection fades, and they become rigid and reactive. This is not strength. It is psychological armor that is fused to the skin. It is a state of being where you can no longer feel the world, so you decide to hurt it before it can hurt you. The role of shame and emotional illiteracy. Beneath almost every toxic pattern lies the heavy shadow of shame. Shame is the feeling of being fundamentally flawed or unworthy. Unlike guilt, which says, quote, 18, shame says, quote, 19. Psychologist Brené Brown explains that shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. Modern culture, with its constant digital exposure, quietly amplifies this shame. We measure our underscore, quote, underscore 20, underscore, struggles against everyone else's curated highlight reels. The result is a fragile self-image that is constantly under threat. When shame is activated, we defend ourselves instinctively. Some people attack, some dominate, some belittle others to feel bigger, and some detach completely. These are protective responses. The toxic individual is almost always someone who learned very early that vulnerability leads to humiliation, so they preemptively harden themselves. This is exacerbated by a widespread emotional illiteracy. Many adults were never taught how to name or regulate their emotions. Feelings become overwhelming because they are unfamiliar. Anger becomes the default emotion because it feels more controllable than the vulnerability of sadness or fear. When emotions are not labeled, the brain struggles to process them, leading to disproportionate explosions over small inconveniences. Modern society does not correct this. It encourages us to stay strong and move on, which really just means suppress your feelings until they explode. The missing rites of passage. There is also a distinct loss of initiation into adulthood in the modern world. In traditional cultures, there were rites of passage that marked a psychological transformation from the ego-centered child to the community-centered adult. Today, many people grow older without ever growing inwardly. Responsibility is assumed, but emotional maturity is never cultivated. As a result, we have a society filled with adult bodies driven by childlike emotional reactions. Entitlement, impulsivity, and emotional avoidance become the norm. The philosopher Martin Heidegger warned that when individuals live only on the surface of existence, absorbed in distraction and conformity, they lose touch with authentic being. This loss creates a deep underlying anxiety that, when unexamined, expresses itself as hostility. Toxicity often feels powerful in the short term. It creates distance, it provides an illusion of control, and it offers a temporary sense of superiority. But in the long term, it erodes the very things that make life worth living: trust, intimacy, and meaning. People who surround themselves with emotional walls eventually find themselves entirely alone, even in a crowded room. This loneliness then reinforces their belief that others cannot be trusted, and the toxic cycle is completed. The turning point: reclaiming the inner world. Now we arrive at the most important insight of all. This is the turning point that transforms everything we have discussed. It is the one thing modern society rarely teaches, yet it is what we desperately need. Toxicity does not end by fighting toxic people. It does not end by complaining about the world or waiting for society to change. It ends when individuals reclaim total responsibility for their own inner world. Most people believe that change happens when the world becomes kinder or more just. But the harder truth is that while external conditions influence us, they do not determine who we become. What truly shapes a human being is the relationship they have with their own inner life. Modern society produces toxicity because it teaches people to outsource responsibility. We are taught to blame the system, blame our childhoods, blame our trauma, or blame our partners. While these factors explain our behavior, they do not excuse us for remaining unconscious. Carl Jung emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming a whole, healthy human being, begins when a person stops projecting their shadow onto the world and takes ownership of it. Until you take ownership of your own darkness, you remain a prisoner of your reactions. The power of the pause. The opposite of toxicity is not niceness. The opposite of toxicity is consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to pause, to observe, and to choose. It is the capacity to feel a surge of pain or anger without immediately discharging that pain onto someone else. This is not a sign of weakness. It is psychological strength at its highest level. Modern society conditions us to react instantly. Every notification and every online argument rewards speed over depth. But every toxic pattern thrives on immediacy. When there is no pause, there is no choice. Viktor Frankl, having survived the horrors of a concentration camp, concluded that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This principle alone dismantles the foundation of a toxic identity. When you realize that you have a choice in how you respond to your own pain, you are no longer a victim of your circumstances. You become the architect of your character. Metabolizing the pain. Real healing does not mean erasing your pain. It means metabolizing it. When emotions are acknowledged, named, and processed, they lose their destructive charge. This is why self-awareness is not a luxury or a self-help trend. It is a survival necessity. Without it, you will unknowingly pass your wounds forward to your children, your friends, and your partners. With it, you can transform your suffering into wisdom. We also need a radical redefinition of strength. Strength is not emotional numbness or the ability to crush others. Real strength is the ability to remain open and empathetic in a world that constantly encourages you to close off. The philosopher Hannah Arendt warned that thoughtlessness, the simple failure to reflect, is the root of much human cruelty. When people stop reflecting, they stop seeing others as fully human. Meaning is the anchor here. People who are anchored in a sense of meaning are far less likely to become toxic. When you know why you are here and what you stand for, you no longer feel the need to dominate, manipulate, or belittle others to feel significant. A meaningful life does not require superiority over others. It requires a commitment to a purpose higher than the ego. The quiet revolution. This brings us to a difficult realization. Toxic people are often those who are internally lost. They are disconnected from their purpose, from self-understanding, and from any sense of genuine belonging. Their inner emptiness seeks compensation through power and control. The solution is not more punishment or more labels. The solution is the conscious interruption of the cycle. Ask yourself this final question and answer it with total honesty. In your moments of tension, do you react automatically or do you pause and choose? That tiny space between what happens to you and how you act is where toxicity dissolves and your humanity returns. Modern society may continue to produce pressure, noise, and confusion. It may continue to reward the loudest and the harshest, but society does not get to decide who you become. That decision happens internally, moment by moment, choice by choice. When enough individuals choose awareness over reaction, responsibility over blame, and meaning over ego, the culture itself begins to shift. This is a quiet revolution. There's no algorithm that promotes the work that happens within the human soul, yet it is the only force powerful enough to heal what modern society has fractured. If this reflection has resonated with you, I encourage you to look inward. Which of these insights challenged you the most? Where do you see the potential for a new kind of consciousness in your own life? Your awareness matters more than you realize. A conscious person in an unconscious society is not weak, they are rare. And in a world of imitation and performance, rarity is where true power lives. Take that breath, find that space, reclaim your peace.